too about writing personal statements because I've done it for both my master's program and the PhD program. So I'm here to share some of the Writing Center's helpful tips and tricks with you, and hopefully this helps you with any personal statement you have to write in the future. So let's go ahead and get started. So if you've never been to the Writing Center before or used any of our services, this is our website, uta.edu/OWL. And then this is our email. This goes to our center director and our receptionist. So if you ever have any questions, want to book an appointment, anything like that, this is where you would go. How many of you have been to the Writing Center before? Y'all gotta come visit us. We're on the 4th floor. We have candy. We're on the 4th floor of the library. So if you get off the elevators, you walk straight back to that back wall and hang a right, and we're right there at the end. Our receptionist, Claire, is a really friendly face. So we're happy to have you all. And it's not just, I think a common misconception about what we do and what we help with is that it's only for like English classes like 1301 and 1302. No, any class that requires any kind of writing here at UTA, we help with. And we also will help with things like applications, not for jobs, but for like graduate school, fellowships, grants, that kind of thing. So we have I've worked with a lot of students who've applied for fellowships for their dissertation research. So that's where you find us, and that's how to get a hold of us. So let's go ahead and get into personal statements. What is a personal statement? Often it's a required essay for any sort of graduate application or scholarship. So here, I think if it hasn't already, the MAV Scholar Shop should open up with all of its funding opportunities for this next year. And a lot of those scholarships require a personal statement. What it does is it tells the admission committee or the scholarship committee about your interests in the program and what you will contribute to the program. If it's a scholarship, it's why you're worthy of the award. In some applications, this is called a letter of intent. That's another word that you'll see, and is written in the form of a letter addressed to an admissions committee, but serves the same purpose. It's just in a letter format. Any questions so far? Okay, pretty straightforward. Okay. Why do we have to do these at all? Why write a personal statement? Well, what it does is, if we think about it, when we submit our resume or our CV to an application committee, you're just a name on the page with a bunch of information about, where you've been to school and what classes you've taken. And that doesn't really let a committee know who you are as a person. And so that's what the personal statement does, is it adds the human element to your application. So here are some of the functions of what it can do for you. It helps you to sell yourself and your abilities, or to convince the committee that you belong in their program, in their fellowship, that you deserve the award. It allows you to introduce yourself to the university. It is their first impression of you. It allows you to demonstrate your interest in and knowledge of the university and the program you're applying to. And it allows you to showcase your abilities and your academic achievements. So things that might fall flat or get missed on a CV or a resume, your personal statement really allows you to shine and show a group of people who've never met you who you really are. All right, so let's talk about this. Let's get personal. So you want to think about, so first step before students feel really overwhelmed when it's time to start writing a personal statement. Normally they have like a page or a word count. And so you're staring at the blank screen and thinking, how do I write about myself? Because have you ever been in the situation where like talking about yourself in like a positive, like here's all my fancy achievements feels kind of awkward? That can kind of happen when you sit down to write a personal statement. You're like, oh gosh, I have to sell myself now. So we really recommend doing the pre-write, which is where you do some sort of free writing. So that's where you just write everything that comes to your mind, just kind of in a free flowing way. The second one's my favorite, which is just listing out everything you could think of that you might want to include in the letter. Clustering is where you kind of write out ideas with similar themes altogether. Questioning, you could reverse it and think, what questions would I ask a potential person applying to this school? And then write out those questions, and you can go back and answer them later. And then dialoguing is really helpful. Get a friend or someone you know to sit down with you and just talk it out. And sometimes we do that a lot at the Writing Center when our clients come in. I'll just ask my whoever I'm consulting with, hey, tell me about what you think you might want to write about. And I will just straight up type out everything they write for them and then turn around the computer and say, I think you have a lot to start with. So that's also a really helpful tactic. So some things to think about. What makes you stand out when you get started thinking about a personal statement? What makes you stand out from other students or professionals in your field in a good way? Like, what makes you above and beyond the rest? And what excites you about the program of study that you're applying to? So those are 2 questions that are really helpful for getting started on a letter. Any questions so far? Okay, feel free to interrupt me. I love when people have questions. Okay, there tend to be 2 types of personal statements, so you want to pay careful attention to the prompt. This is key. Sometimes students write a lot and it's not really in alignment with what the prompt is asking, so you want to make sure we're staying on prompt to determine the specific length, format, style, or content required by the committee. If that committee says no more than 500 words, they mean it. I had a friend apply to some master's programs this past fall, and she said, it's 250 words over. Do you think they're going to care? And I said, I think they're going to care. So make sure that you're adhering to all their requirements. You don't want your application to be the one that gets knocked out of the running for some silly reason. So just making sure we're sticking to all the rules is helpful. So first, under the 2 types of personal statements, we have a general comprehensive personal statement. So this allows you the maximum amount of freedom in terms of what you can write. It has no word count and is often the standard for medical or law school applications. So that's the general comprehensive. The second one is the response to a specific prompt or set of questions. So sometimes what you'll see on certain grad school application websites or certain fellowship websites is they won't ask for one whole essay kind of on one page. Instead, they'll have these boxes that'll say things like, but in an essay between 250 and 400 words, explain your biggest research achievement. And you'll have to like copy and paste it into the little application box. And there will be several questions like that. So that's something you also might encounter. So most business and graduate school applications will ask you specific questions, and your statement should respond directly to the questions being asked. No more, no less. These will often request a word limit count. So when we say no more, no less, make sure you're directly answering their question. When they say, what is your biggest research achievement? You talk about your biggest research achievement. Somewhere where students tend to falter is they start to go on tangents and ramble about other things they've done. Those have a different place in your application. You can probably find another question to highlight that thing you've rambled on to. We always want to make sure we're sticking to answering the question. Okay. So here are some common prompts that we have seen from different schools. So please provide a separate essay not to exceed 2 double-spaced type pages using 12-point font. In this essay, you may discuss any attributes, experiences, or interests that would enable you to make a distinctive contribution to the law school and or the legal profession. So this is a prompt we've seen from a law school that one of our clients was applying to. And then here's a medical school prompt we've seen. Use this section of the application to compose a personal essay explaining why you want to study the field of medicine. So those are some pretty standard prompts. Do we have any questions about those? Okay, awesome. Okay, so here are the examples of that second type of prompt I talked about, where things are a little more specific. They're not those big, broad, sweeping, tell me about yourself. So like I said, I kind of alluded this one earlier. In 600 words or less, briefly assess your career progress to date, elaborate on your future career plans, and your motivation for pursuing an MBA. So if we look at that, and if I were your writing center consultant that you came in and saw, and you wanted help getting started on this prompt, I would say, okay, we have 3 things we need to attack: your career progress up to date, to our current date, your future career plans, and your motivations for pursuing it. It's like a checklist, 1, 2, and 3. Those 3 things need to be in there, not a 4th thing that's not on there. And then we have example 2, and complete the following statement. So this is something a lot of schools will do, is they'll kind of give this like open-ended quote, and then you have to finish it with an essay. People may be surprised to learn that and you can interpret that however you like in a way that you think is going to make you look good to the committee. And then this is our last example. Tell us about an accomplishment that you are proud of and how it relates to the person you are. So these are all examples from an MBA program. Notice that the above examples require you to complete all 3 essays. There's not a choice of one of the 3. So that's something you need to pay close attention to when you're on an application portal. Do they want you to do all of the essays listed, or do you get to pick? Because every school is different. So make sure that you take a look at that. Okay. And then here's another example that we have from a humanities PhD program. Applicants should describe their research and professional interests and how this program is a good match for their interests. While there is no prescribed length, statements are generally 1 to 2 pages single-spaced. This is the kind of statement I had to write to get into the PhD program here at UTA. I wrote a 1-page statement about my research interests, why the program was a good match, and I crammed as much as I possibly could into that 1 page. Notice that some of the application requirements specify the length and content of the essay, where others do not. Always follow the general guidelines and the detailed expectations like we talked about. Okay. Do we have any questions about how to tackle, like, have you all seen any of these types of prompts in your application journey and gotten tripped up by them, or have any questions for me? Yes.
Like for the length?
Yes, briefly.
What do you suggest?
Oh, when it just says briefly, were you allowed to like submit like an attachment, or did it have like an attachment? I would say no more. If it said briefly, no more than a page. Yeah, no more than a page. Because I think if you get onto the second page, then that's probably, yeah, that's so vague. Doesn't that suck when it's like, give me more than that? Yeah, I would say if it says briefly and they don't give you a page limit, don't exceed 1 12-point font page. So yeah, you picked a good plan of attack there. All right. Best practices. So here's some things. So writing the personal statement is not just about sitting down and writing it. There's some things you can do to help ensure your success. So let's talk about this first one. You want to conduct a research on each program you are applying to in order to write a unique essay for each application. Do not use the same application for every school or program to which you're applying. Okay, so I want to talk a little bit about this. So when I was applying to PhD programs around the country, I did research on each of the schools, and however you like to stay organized, I would recommend having a Word doc where you keep some general notes about every school, an Excel sheet, whatever floats your boat. And I would notice some schools really valued like hands-on, like projects in the community. Some really valued teaching. Some valued like intense research more than others. And so I would make notes of all of those things because I needed to tailor my application letter and how I was going to show myself off to the committee a little differently for every school. So something, I know that sounds really scary. Oh, you have to have a totally different essay for each application. What I did is I kind of had like a 2-page like core like document where I had everything I could think I would need to write just about myself for any application. And then when I sat down to do these unique essays, I would pull the parts of that were the most relevant to each essay and then kind of fill in the in between. That way I wasn't starting from scratch every time, but I was making it customized along the way. My application here letter at UTA looked very different than other schools I applied to because UTA values totally different things than other schools I had applied to. So it's important. Another thing, a reason why this is important is the committee, when they open your letter and they start reading it, they want to make sure that you've looked into the school, that you've been thoughtful about why you want to go there and why the program, the professors, the things they offer are a good fit to you. If they can tell you've submitted like a generic letter that you're probably sending everybody, it's not going to really show that you're invested in being a student in their program. So another thing that goes along with that is you want to notice the program's pedagogical approaches. So are the professors studying theorists that you are interested in? Something that students sometimes don't think about is the program a good fit for you? Do they offer a lot of hands-on mentorship with their students? Do they kind of let their graduate students do a more independent route? Do you have room with your master's thesis or dissertation to do a creative or more non-traditional project? Are they very focused on the traditional, written dissertation that'll go in a database? So you need to look at the program and see, is it a good fit for you? Because it's not worth applying to if you feel like you're going to be forced to conform to a box that isn't right for you. So, and that's okay. There were schools I looked at that I went, ugh, no, not for me. And I just didn't apply to those. So that's an important step in the research, is saying, is it worth applying at all? And then number 3, you want to pay attention to the fields that successful graduates go into and the research which faculty mentor in those fields. So you want to look at the faculty and where the graduates end up. So a sneaky way to see where graduates are and what they're doing with their degrees is to stalk them on LinkedIn. So you can go, I don't know if you all know this, but you can go to, say, UTA's LinkedIn page, and you can click on alumni. And if you want to see what our engineering alumni are up to, you can type into the search bar engineer, and you can go stalk where they all work now and what they're doing. So that's a really helpful thing if you want to see kind of where do people end up? What are they doing with their research? You can do a little sleuthing. Also, you want to see, what do the faculty mentor? If you specifically want to do something, say, with an environmentalist lens, and nobody at that school in that department, none of those faculty focus on environmentalism, that might not be the best school for you because they can't support you. But if you look at a school and they have multiple faculty that do that, you'd be like, heck yeah, I think this is a place I want to be. Another pro tip I have for this is that you also want to make sure that you take some notes on these people, because that is a thing you can mention in the letter is, I saw that Dr. Johnson works on X and I would be interested in working with her. So yeah, that's an important step in writing your letter, is making sure there's faculty that align with your interests. Do we have any questions about this process? Awesome. Okay. So some best practices for the actual letter itself. So you've done all your research, you're prepared, you have your notes. So let's talk about the letter. So you want to tell a story about your qualifications rather than listing them. So if we think about ourselves as humans, we're very compelled by narrative. We love narrative structure. And so you don't want to speculate about your future, or gush about your past accomplishments. We want to make sure we're coming across in a way that's compelling to the committee. Don't lie or exaggerate. This is a big one. I don't know if you all saw the story. There was some student who got into an Ivy League because they wrote this whole essay about how their mom had died, and their mom was not dead. And the Ivy League caught them. So I know that's a very extreme example, but don't be that person. Don't lie and sell yourself. You are great as you are. You've achieved so much cool stuff. Be honest about who you are. Don't come up with stuff that isn't true. Just find a way to make your story about yourself interesting. So often students sell themselves short. I helped a student with her fellowship application in engineering, and she was talking me through some stuff she'd done, and we were working on the letter. And then all of a sudden she was like, yeah, I got to go to this really elite summer institute where I worked with the government. And this was my second time meeting with her. And I was like, lead with that. Lead with that, please. So I bet there's things that you've done that are really awesome that you probably aren't even thinking about. Okay, so here's an example that we have here. When I was growing up, whenever the phone would ring, my mother would say, the doctor is in. Her phrase signaled that the call was for me. My mother always expected that I would attend a doctoral program in psychology. However, I believed that one of the reasons she answered in this manner is that she recognized one of my strengths lies in the way I communicate and listen to others. In fact, as an adult, I strongly believe that we must become active listeners in order to understand each other. So if we look here, they did something really clever. Instead of just saying, I have strong listening and communication skills, instead of just writing that as a sentence and moving on, which everybody can kind of say that, they told this really compelling narrative story about how that, a story from their family, how that's reflected in an example of who they are. So if you were reading this application, this would probably come across as more interesting than just a student who wrote, I'm a good listener, and moved on. All right, so let's look at this next one. So we want to notice the author's use of I. You want to bring your resume to life. That's kind of the point of the letter, like I said earlier. But you don't want to just list things. You always want to explain further why your experiences are relevant for graduate school. In other words, show us what your resume cannot tell us. So help us fill in the gaps of those resume points. So here, I'll read this example out loud. So during my undergraduate study, I acquired the necessary background knowledge by taking advanced courses. So not just regular courses, we're pointing out advanced courses in the area of psychology and sociology, including sociological research methods, social theory, statistics, psychological research, and psychotherapy. So these are probably all classes that would make them look good to their program. That's something that programs sometimes care about, is what courses did you pick for your undergraduate degree? Excuse me. Along with these courses, I had an internship. So we have that bolded. They point to, I didn't just do classes, I got out in the world and I had an internship. at the Asian Task Force Against Domestic Violence, a nonprofit organization. In addition, they're pointing to a volunteer experience. I volunteered at, and I'm so sorry that I don't know how to pronounce that, but I don't want to butcher it, a nursing service at the Cerno Children's Medical Hospital in Japan. From the internship, my volunteer work, I have gained practical experience, which I feel contributed to my academic and professional success. So this is from a real master's application to Boston University. So they don't just list things they've done, they weave together this story of the courses they took, the internship they had, and where they volunteered. Okay. Let's go to the next. Do we have any questions so far about the examples that I've shown? Okay, I hope these are helping kind of spark some ideas. Let's see. Okay. All right. See. Okay, this is where I mentioned that sometimes you'll bring up, you don't always have to, but sometimes you'll bring up a professor, especially if you're going to be doing research projects in your degree, a professor you'd like to have as your mentor or work under. So we want to provide specific and logical reasons for why you want to go to this specific university you're applying to and that specific program. Back up any claim you make with logical evidence. So every student can say, I want to go here, but why specifically do you want to go there? So here's this example. I'm very passionate about pursuing a multifaceted direction in my creation of art. And this is the reason why the graduate program at Artistic University is my first choice. I have found the professors at Artistic to not only be excellent scholars and researchers, but also current practitioners in the most advanced digital technology. So they're not just saying, I think the professors are cool, but they're pointing to a specific reason why they like the faculty there, that they are up to date on these technologies they care about. I especially am looking forward to, and this is a very common thing to do, is to transition with, I'm especially looking forward to the opportunity of working with Professor Scardino. His creation of the Masterworks animation software is inspirational, and I have used it extensively during my tenure at Falmouth University. That's funny. I think Cody put that in there. So notice how this specifically points to the research that this professor has done, letting the committee know, I looked on your website, I've looked at their work, I'm not uninformed. So some people have a bit of a different thought on this. Some writing advice will tell you not to what we call name drop. The way that at the Writing Center we avoid it feeling like name dropping is to make this rhetorical move where you say, this is specifically why I find this professor compelling. That way you're not just like dropping a name and moving on, but you're making a real point as to why you want to work with them. Any questions about talking about professors you want to work with in your statement? Okay. All right. Some more best practices. You want to concentrate on the opening paragraph. This is where you grab readers' attention. So, for example, I'm pretty sure the University of Texas at Austin, I'm pretty sure their English PhD program gets like 500 applicants every year, like hundreds. And so if you don't stand out, you're going in the recycling bin. And that sounds harsh, but that's true. If they only have 5 slots to offer and you don't grab them right away at the start of your letter, they're not going to maybe read more to see if you're compelling or not. You're going to get knocked out in that first round where they're trying to narrow it down. So the best thing that we can do is to grab our readers' attention. So you want to concentrate on that opening paragraph, making a strong first impression. You want to grab your readers' attention and provide a framework for the essay. Write a thesis or at least an introduction to a unifying theme. So let's take a look at what that looks like. 2 scenes stand out in my mind from my first visit to Brazil's wetland forests. Hold on. Okay, there we go. Sorry, I got tripped up with the font. Forest burning before seed planting and trees as hedgerows. Before the planting season, I could see the leafless remnants of burning trees still standing. The burning of pristine forests destroys both the habitat and the countless species which depend and thrive on these habitats. The few remaining bare, I don't know why this font is tripping me up so bad. Scarred trees silently convey to the coast the cost to our natural resources of pursuing our economic interests. Some forests are preserved by government edicts issued in response to international pressures, but most of this preservation occurs alongside major roads, not to protect the ecosystem, but to prevent disturbances to ranches and farms along the highway. And we'll notice this part that's bolded. The clash between economic and environmental concerns that I witnessed in Brazil fascinates me and attracts me to the doctoral program in environmental studies at the University of Texas at Arlington. So they were able, if we notice that bolded point, they were able to take this really striking imagery of what they saw on this trip to Brazil and fashion this thesis statement about what they care about and why they want to bring, like what they would bring to UTA as a student. Do we have any questions about kind of crafting a thesis statement about yourself? Something that's important to remember is every story that you tell in one of these letters needs to have a purpose. So somewhere where students can kind of trip up is I have some water. Okay. Thank you. Sorry, allergies. Okay, so you want to make sure every story you tell has a purpose. That was my point there. Okay. All right. Sorry. You want to make sure that you're always showing off, sorry, your knowledge in the field. Too many people graduate with little or no knowledge of the nuts and bolts of their field they hope to enter. So I know we joke that C's get degrees, but those people also don't tend to write the best graduate applications. Thank you so much. Down there. Okay. So be selective and specific in providing the preliminary knowledge of your field. So let's take a look at this. They say, I want to point to some of the bolded points. So they're talking about how they are interested in women's literature, Anglo-Saxon poetry, and folklore. Sorry, y'all. I did not think I was going to get, my allergies were going to be this bad. Okay. So they're pointing to that in their comprehensive exams they took in their last degree, what they specialized in, which was 19th century novels about women. And then they give a deeper look into what that meant. They point to the fact that they talked about the relationship between high literature and folk literature. And then they point to a specific author, Toni Morrison, and her use of classical, biblical, African, and African folk tradition. So they don't just say that they're interested in women's literature. They specifically talk about what theme in women's literature they're interested in and point to an article or an author, sorry, that they were interested in looking at and that they have looked at. And they say that if they are accepted to this program, they plan to work further on this essay and research into Morrison's work. So the point is that you want to make sure that when you're talking about knowledge that you have of your field, that you're being specific, that you're not just saying, oh, I know something about environmentalism. Oh, I know something about literature, but pointing to the specific things you find interesting and that you know about your field. And that will really show off your scope of knowledge. Excuse me, 1 second. So best practices, revise and edit. I know this may not sound like a lot of fun, but you should leave yourself so much time, plenty of time, to do multiple rounds of revisions on the letter. I had a really great mentor when I wrote my letter to get into UTA, and he looked at it, I think, 3 or 4 times with me. So I think sometimes we get into this, there's this big myth in writing that the best writers pump out a good first draft and that's it. No, I think the best writers know how to sit down and revise their work and ask for help and figure out what needs improving. That's more realistic to me. So many application committees consider the personal essay or the letter of intent a display of your writing skills also. So graduate school requires and fellowships require so much writing. And so the quality of the writing in the essay really also matters as much as the content. They want to see that you have the capacity to be able to grow as a graduate student and write at the graduate level. So I've had both experiences at the Writing Center. I had a client, she was awesome, the one who applied for the fellowship in engineering. I saw her multiple times. One of our other consultants saw her multiple times. And we're still waiting to hear back if she got her fellowship, but we're, fingers crossed for her. And I've also had clients who come in with their letter of intent, and there's a lot of work that we can tell needs to be done. And I say, when is this due? And they say tomorrow. And my heart breaks a little bit. So make sure that you don't wait till the last minute and you leave yourself plenty of time to give yourself those multiple drafts, ask your mentors for help, come to the writing center, that kind of thing. Nothing's worse than a missed typo or something you wish you would have said in the letter. All right, so let's recap. If you're given an open-ended prompt, such as the type 1, where it was those medical school and law school ones, where they're just like, talk about yourself, we address you kind of hit these high points. Hit them with your best shot first, place your best points at the top of your essay, like we talked about. We want to grab our reader and get them in. And then you want to demonstrate that you have thought through and planned out your future. So sometimes I will say this kind of freaks students out. They're like, I can't imagine where I'm going to be at the end of my graduate program. And I tell people, give it your best guess. Like, if you could just create a vision, I would like to have studied, like our last example, African American literature. I would like to continue to work on this piece of research about Toni Morrison. Just give it your best vision. It's okay. What I wrote in my letter that I said I wanted my future to look like in 5 years is not what it looks like now. My life right now is cool and my research is cool. That's not what I envisioned for myself 5 years ago. But what I wrote then was authentic to what I thought at the moment. So it's not like you're locking yourself into a contract, but just it shows that you've put time and thought into reflecting on what you want to do. You want to demonstrate that you have thought through and planned out your future. We just talked about that. This shows foresight and maturity. And you want to be clear about why you want to attend the school or program for which you're applying to. So for example, I was talking to someone at the Writing Center the other day, and they are it's one of our tutors, they're starting to look at law schools. And she was talking about what cities she wanted to live in. And I was like, oh, do those programs have the type of law you want to study? And she said, oh, I haven't looked yet. And I was like, maybe we should look into that. All right, some common pitfalls. We want to avoid super sensitive subjects. For example, references to potentially controversial subjects, religious or political issues. These are not always a good idea. Now, if you're applying to a program in political science, political issues will probably come up in your application. Or if you're applying for a PhD in religion, also will come up. The reason we say this is not because these aren't valid parts of who you are. It's because we don't want to give committees a reason to knock your letter out. So we just kind of recommend avoiding those. Stick to your academic achievements and your research interests. You want to avoid discussing experiences or accomplishments all the way back from high school. So by this time, you should have completed your BA or BS if you are applying to a graduate program or a fellowship. And so you have achieved a lot at the university level. So those things that you've achieved in your high school days are just not your most recent and your most relevant experience. So you can leave those out. You always want to be aware of your tone. We want to maintain a professional tone. While subjects may be personal, coming across as preachy, fanatical, extreme, dramatic, or too strong is not what we're going for. We want to present ourselves in the best light. We want to avoid any sort of cuteness in style. You want to sound professional, not gimmicky, no cliches. And we want to steer clear, like I've talked about through this whole presentation, generalities, talking about things in vague terms. You know yourself best, so be specific. All right, and like I talked about at the beginning, this is where you can find us, uta.edu/OWL. If you've never registered with us before, this is where you go to do that. You can also get to this from our main webpage, but it's uta.mywconline.com. That's our scheduling platform. You'll have to register for an account on it, and then you can see our whole schedule of when all the tutors are available. We are closed for spring break, but then we'll be back open for the rest of the semester. We can help you at any stage of your writing process. We don't fix your paper, so no one's going to take your paper away from you and mark it up with red ink and hand it back and be really judgy. We work collaboratively with you. We provide our thoughtful feedback and insight as people who have English degrees or see writing all of the time, and we facilitate discussion with you to help you grow and improve as a writer. I always like to say my goal for my Writing Center clients who come and see me is that I want to see you grow, not just within individual pieces of writing or assignments, but your skills overall, so that every next writing assignment you tackle, you feel better equipped to tackle it. So thank you all so much for having me. And if we have any questions, we can do some Q&A here at the end. Yes. Okay, cool. Let me go back to that slide.
I always feel that I ramble and I don't want to look that way, nor do I want to bore the reader. How could I avoid this?
So I understand so not wanting to bore the reader or go on for too long. So what I would say is this should probably be no more than depending on your word length and how far they let you go, I would say probably no more than a 5 to 6 sentence paragraph. So kind of your standard paragraph length, I think, is as long as this beginning part should be. And that's why earlier when I talked about dialoguing for brainstorming, sitting down with another person, sometimes having that second set of eyes, read that first paragraph and say, hey, do I tell this story concisely or am I rambling? That can be really helpful. So I would say no more than 5 to 6 sentences and have a second set of eyes look over it and see if they think you're telling your story in your most concise way. So I hope that's helpful. Sweet. Yes.
How do you tell a compelling story, especially when you come from a first generation background where you can't really say I'm an aerospace engineer, you can't say oh, my dad helped me build rockets, he's an engineer, he inspired me. Or saying in this story they went to Brazil, a lot of people.
Yeah, not a lot of us have been to Brazil.
Yeah. So, just when you're a first gen, your experiences are limited. So it's sometimes hard to justify your interest in research. How can you work around that?
So I'm a first generation college student. I'm the first person in my family who's been. So that issue of how do I make these compelling narratives about myself when I'm a first generation college student is something I had to do in my applications. So I would say, yeah, we don't have our parents to point to and say oh yeah, my parents inspired me. I pointed to mentors I had in my undergrad who really inspired me. I had this one professor who I thought she was the coolest and she really took me under her wing. So I pointed to her in some of my applications. I pointed to ways I contributed to my campus community as things that I had done that helped make me compelling to programs. So I would say, think about the professors, the colleagues, the people you've met here at UTA who've really inspired you and enriched your life, and think about the things that you have done on and for the UTA community. And that is plenty to talk about. And I would say a lot of people mention that they're first generation in their applications because it's part of your story. It's part of who you are. And so I would say being authentic to yourself and framing your story in that way is probably the best go-to. Is that helpful? Okay, cool. Awesome. Any other questions? Y'all are asking really thoughtful, awesome questions. Y'all should come sit in all of our Writing Center workshops and be part of the FAQ because y'all are a great audience. Good. All right. Any other questions? Well, thank you all so much for coming. Oh, we have another one. Okay, we're going to let them type. I will say if you're ever interested in any of our other graduate writing workshops, they're all on our website. So if you go to our website, we have a little tab with all our workshops for the semester. A lot of those we host over in the Writing Center on the 4th floor of the library. So feel free to come to those. We do how to be your own editor, how to write a lit review, general graduate school writing advice, all sorts of things. So we'd be happy to see you all at those. And they are free to you. So come hang out. And like I said, Claire has candy on her desk. You can ask her for it. Aw, yay. Yay! Well, I'm so glad this was helpful to you all. I know that applying for graduate school can feel really stressful. I grew a gray hair while applying for graduate school. So we're here, the Writing Center is here to help make that process less stressful for you all. So come see us anytime. We are happy to help. So thank you all so much.